said as well, please use the chat room. There you go. Good evening and welcome along to tonight's webinar on grants writing. And please use the chat room, as I was saying, in terms of questions, comments, clarification. Happy to address those at certain junctures, and at the end we'll open it up for Q&A. But as I said, we're looking at this from a twofold approach, even in terms of grants. One, the writing of the grants, but also being grants ready. Being grants ready means plans, processes, procedures, everything into cost benefit analysis, community consultation. And then writing the grant is the way you write it, obviously, being short, succinct, and to the point. So I'm going to talk about the 3 C's and the 3 P's. In terms of grants writing, clear, concise, compelling. That's a well-written grant application. Clear, concise, compelling, or short, succinct, and to the point. In terms of a grant's strategy, plan, process, procedure, having a plan, which entails having a grants calendar, knowing what grants are coming up, what grants are recurrent, creating a project plan, creating a budget for the necessary projects that you're seeking funding for, having a policy around it, basically, that it's going to be part of your wider remit and funding structure in terms of strategic funding for your association or your club, and that grants fit into and alongside fundraising, sponsorship, crowdfunding, bequests, donations, right the way across the board. It was what we're doing with other tennis clubs in other states, basically, the wider gamut of how you should be looking at wider funding for your club. Okay, so, and the procedure, how are you going to enact it? Who does it? Given that a lot of you are volunteers, a lot of this is going to come down to time and capacity, right? Time to write it and capacity to deliver it. You're all busy anyway. You're all busy operationally running a tennis club, let alone finding time to play the game as well. So where are you going to find time to sit down and write a grant application? All right. And obviously what I'm subscribing is you don't do any last minute applications, because inherently they're going to fail. All right. Quantifiably, they're saying 86% of all grant applications in Australia fail across all sectors because it's that competitive. All right. There are indicatively about 27 new grants open per day. In Australia, about 39 grants closing in any given day. That's across all sectors, obviously, both public and private in Australia. No shortage of funding. No shortage of grants funding out there, and no shortage of awarding of funding. What is a lack of is quality applications. And I've seen it all. And I assess grants and have done for local, state and federal government and for the private sector. So I've seen it all in terms of haphazard, lackadaisical, last minute applications. You need to step away from that. Optimally, you're going to get your grant application in about 72 hours in advance. Why? Because they may close at 5 p.m. on a Friday, but they're opened up in chronological order, date stamp at 9 a.m. on Monday. And you want to be first in, best dressed to make that impression for that grants assessor. Because if I'm reading your tennis club application at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm fresh and I'm taking on board what you're saying. And I'm benchmarking your application then, or every application that comes thereafter, against yours. If I'm reading yours at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm a bit tired. I'm a bit lethargic. I've been reading a lot of grant applications all day, and I'm seeing more quantity than I am quality. And so you don't fit into the matrix of being one of those ones that I should be shortlisting and earmarking against it. So that's being tactile. That's understanding the name of the game and the rules of the game. But I want to see a quantifiable business case plus a budget. I'm expecting you as a tennis club to extrapolate from a business plan, a project plan, and your capex, your budget for what you want to achieve, whether it be infrastructure or a community development program or a youth program or a participation program or a health and well-being program, whatever it is, I need to see a plan. And that's what I'm not seeing at the moment. People are being reactive rather than proactive in terms of grants. Tell you what, give us the money and then we'll come up with the idea. You don't talk to your bank manager like that, let alone actually ask for a grant. So very much I want to talk about plan, process, procedure tonight, and very much then when you write it, short, succinct, and to the point. No waffle, no wordology. Don't talk around the subject, talk at the subject. Very much less is more is your principle in grants writing. Do I need to know everything about you? No, because if you're shortlisted, I'm going to Google you. I'm going to look at your club website. I'm going to look at your club social media, that you're current, topical, and relevant. And what you're saying in the grant application is reflected in your narrative, which is your business storytelling of your club, the story of where you're coming from, where are you, and where you're going. And I need to be suitably impressed by that you match 2 key components for government, that you're innovative and you're sustainable. You're going to be here in 5 years and 10 years time as a club. You've got the financial capacity to do that outside of the grant, and you've got the business acumen to run the club. So what am I saying? I'm creating a lot of expectation, aren't I? And I'm giving a lot of homework. All right. But this is where you need to be. Not right now, but you need to be thinking seriously about this in the next 6 to 12 months, because the expectation and the bar has been raised by local, state, and federal government in terms of funding. And now more than ever before, there's an expectation around cost benefit analysis, community consultation, basically undertaking all these things that are quintessentially operating a business. But that's how they see you. They don't see a tennis club. They see a business, profit or loss. And in fact, they don't even see tennis. They see you as a community hub. And that's the terminology I'd be using as well, that you are a community hub because you're a draw card for people to play sport. You're a draw card for people to come together. You're a draw card for people from different cultural linguistic diversity groups to come together, young and old. Tennis is a game you can play for life. And that's one of the great advantages of it. So you need to sell that, because a grant application is a glorified sales pitch. And what I ask tennis clubs is, do you know how to sell yourself? Because that's what you're being questioned on. Because they still want to see a unique selling point, a point of difference. How do you stand out from the crowd? Why should I give you money over AFL, netball, hockey, any other sport we want to talk about? So you need to look at your own strengths and obviously look at perceivable weaknesses. You may even want to contemplate collaborating with other tennis clubs on a wider community project for a greater demographic or geographic. With your association with Tennis Victoria, you need to be subscribing to what government see as best practices in terms of sport, in terms of activity, in terms of young and old participating in sport, and subscribing to that and be singing off the same hymn sheet as government, and not going in there as a silo-esque tennis club and thinking what I think is best and that's what I'm going to get funding for. It's about matching and aligning to what government want to fund. And that means there's always a rush because people are doing last-minute grant applications just to the application form. Well, you need to think about why the grant's been conceptualized, what it's there to do, the background to the grant. And people are missing out reading that because they have a shortened time frame to do everything. And I'm very much, as I said already, aware that a lot of you are volunteers. And again, you're already busy as is. So again, it's about how are you understanding time management and project management when it comes to grants. So I work with tennis clubs that may only apply for a couple of grants in a year. Nothing wrong with that. I work with tennis clubs, that apply for 10, 20, 30 grants in a year. Okay, it's knowing where you fit in without having the compulsion that you feel you have to apply for every grant, because you shouldn't apply for every grant. You should apply for the ones that are best fit for your club and best fit for the game of tennis, whether it be infrastructure or whether it be a program or project at the end of the day. So think about what I'm saying here throughout. Feel free to contemplate questions and put them in the chat room, and we'll get to those questions as well if anything's striking you from what I'm saying at the end of the day. Okay. Sorry, just I have to tick on that sec. Just bear with me a second. Get that off the screen. So, as I said, time and capacity is your biggest issue. So you have to make the decision about, right, am I going to have someone dedicated role on the committee who's going to look after this, or members on the committee? Some tennis clubs I work with have a grants team, someone to look after the budget, someone to look after the letters of support, someone basically doing business development, and someone then writing it basically. And then potentially one of those people is also the project manager as well, who's going to be delivering it upon the accession of funding. Or do you need to bring in a grants writer? Your choice. But either which way it won't get done regardless, right? So it needs to be a choice of, can we do this ourselves and build our own capacity? Or do we need to bring in a grants writer who understands the remit and what needs to be done? Choices there to have a plan. And as I said, business plan, project plan, master plan, which is the flavor of the month now for state and federal government, a site master plan or a tennis development plan. Now, Tennis Victoria will be here to support you with all of this, right? In terms of resources, capabilities. So you're not on your own. All right. So Tennis Victoria and Tennis Australia are providing necessary materials for you to help you with this. So investigate it, ask the questions, seek help and guidance, because it's there to help you. Okay. And a budget. Okay. Very much, again, treasurer should be all across this, basically having a budget template, designing and building projects and budgets, basically. But as I said, the big thing now for government is cost benefit analysis. What's the return on investment? Because government expect you to give you $1, they expect a 3-to-1 ratio, win ratio return. You get $1 and you turn it into 3 in terms of translation and in terms of effect. So cost benefit analysis, what's the greater giving here? What's the greater translative effect of the funding? If you build it, will they come? All right. So quantify and qualify. As a grants assessor, I love stats and facts, tangible data that can't be argued against. That's what I want to see, not speculative, tangible. So you need to reference government reports, Tennis Victoria reports, your own surveys, polls, questionnaires. That's what I want to see, evidence-based. So make a statement and back it up in a grant application. That's what I want to see. And in planning your answer, tell you what I love as a grants assessor, bullet points, subheadings, white space. Normally I get Egyptian hieroglyphics, blocks of text that I have to decipher what are they saying. Okay. And I think I can say this after in an Irishman 15 years in this great country. Australians write the longest sentences known to man. You don't believe in commas or full stops in this country, do you? All right. You should start believing them. They're great things, right? And it's about breaking it up so I can manage it. Again, put yourself in my shoe of how many applications I'm reading in a given day. All right. Because now you're asking not only in terms of text, you're being asked to upload documents, right? Attachments, right? So I need to see a copy of the financials, the P&Ls of the club. I need to see a copy of your business plan. I need to see the letters of support. I need to see the quotes if it's infrastructure, all of which take time to source, obviously. I'm now asking, or nearly expecting, visual footage. So I work with tennis clubs who've got drone footage of their site, who've got a day in the life at the tennis club, basically. They're developing apps and podcast material. That's where we're going. And it's about not just about the written word anymore. It's about the visual representation of yourselves as a club or tennis association in terms of your community impact and traction that you're having. So yes, I'm giving a lot of homework. I don't expect you to do it overnight. I expect you to do it over the next 6 to 12 months. Because this is the expectation of all sports and all funding basically given to sport. Basically, they want to professionalize you. They want to think about how you go from amateur to professional status. You're integral in the community. Sell how integral you are in the community. And that means numbers, because if I'm a state sporting body, I'm going to give to the growth sports, right? I'm going to give to those sports that are growing in participation numbers. Tennis always has. So quantify and qualify that for me is what I want to see. And the budget must reflect financial viability as well of the club. Am I going to give a grant to a tennis club operating at a financial loss? No. Okay. So again, obviously what's very popular at the moment in terms of funding is 50-50 funding, match funding. It's cost offset and risk offset for government. And it works for government. So you either have the money to apply or you don't have the money to apply. It has to be confirmed, not pending. All right. So it's very much, again, thinking about where you are and where you need to be in terms of grants and government expectation around funding, let alone basically thinking it's a begging bowl, because it's not. Grants are an investment, not a gift. They are not a handout. This is a business transaction. There's ROI and KPIs, return on investment expected, and key performance indicators as measurables of that funding. All right. To prove to me that you have been the right choice that we've awarded the funding to. Okay. So it's really thinking in a different way if you haven't thought that way already. Okay. And if you have, congratulations, you're on the right track. Getting those quotes, as I said, optimally, I usually like to see 2 or 3. I want to see basically how you have a process of doing that as well. Normally an obligation to council, but now an obligation to you as well. Speaking of council, a lot of you may be on council land or council facilities. You need to talk about how you're collaborating with council, working with councils, getting the letter of support from council, all of those different things at the end of the day. Government relations that you should be undertaking as well. And again, I would always subscribe that, you should be getting letters of support from your state and federal MPs for any grant application that you're putting in. All right. And that's what I mean by letters of support. So basically, again, I'll get one from Tennis Victoria. Not trying to put due application on you, Tam. You may be inundated with emails after this. It's very much, again, thinking about your MPs, your local council, and other entities that may be using the tennis courts. So that could be schools, community groups. So it shows a wide traction of usage, greater demographic, greater geographic, basically. In other words, the tennis club is not just for people playing tennis. It's for anyone who wants to come and play tennis, not just for club members. All right. But we want to open it up. That's what the narrative they want to see in here. That's up to you at the end of the day as a judgment call as a club. But seeing your club in a different light, that it's there for the community as much as it is for its members. So it's about facilitating both. It's too restrictive for government just to say you're catering for your members. And you may have 270 members, which is great, but they want to see more because they want more bang for their buck at the end of the day as well. Okay. So government's two favorite phrases in terms of funding are being shovel ready. that you can hit the ground running, that we basically, in terms of we award funding, you can make it happen. And then VFM, which is their favorite acronym, value for money, because it's taxpayers' money, right, in terms of a grant. So it's coming back and it has to be spent with great probity, transparency, and authenticity. So you must give them a value assurance that that is the case with your tennis club. So you need to resell even the grants that you've done before, and what a great proficient job you did delivering those grants and those budgets and those projects on time and on budget. So grant application preparation, they're now expecting the following: a facility usage schedule, designs and drawings of a proposed facility or enhancement of such, financial statements of your club, strategic justification for the project scope and inclusive design, project affordability, project deliverability, and the overarching budget. Even though you may be asking for a component of it, but the overarching structural budget, basically, of your 5-year master plan for the development of your club. It's a long way from just asking for new court surfaces, floodlights, and fencing, isn't it? So again, we're moving forward quite fast in terms of expectation. All right. So again, think about where you are and where you need to be around this, and build this capacity over time in your club to do this. But this is what they're now asking for. Okay, and they'll ask for a lot more, and again, more regularly in terms of future grants. So be prepared for that. Okay. So again, value for money. You need to leverage basically how important you are in the community and the value you provide to the community, both from a sporting, a community aspect, a health and well-being aspect, a participatory aspect, basically, male, female. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of funding around female inclusion, female participation, female facilities being at sporting amenities now and recently, both from state and federal. So where are you around that at the end of the day, and having a strategy around that at the end of the day, which is what they want to give the money for. Same goes for multicultural, same goes for Aboriginal. This is what we're looking at. This is what they're awarding funding for at the end of the day. Where are you fitting into this remit of what's there, on top of the funding they're awarding, obviously, for infrastructure? Okay. So I have no problem you just applying for new floodlights, new nets, new clubhouse, new toilets, new disability access, new car parking. No problem. But there's a whole lot more money out there as well. And I want you to contemplate that, and at least look at the feasibility of it and say, well, can we, should we, and if we actually get the money, can we deliver on time and on budget, basically? So tennis clubs that I'm working with across the states and territories, they're doing community inclusion programs, they're doing health and well-being after school programs, they're basically doing mentoring programs around mental health and sport, they're doing an over 55s program, getting people physically active, all these different things that they're applying for different funding for outside of sports. So it could come from the Department of Community Services, could come from even the private sector with philanthropy if they're eligible to apply and they have a club foundation, or they're using the ASF, the Australian Sports Foundation, out of Canberra. So there's options there everywhere. It's how ambitious you want to be in terms of grants as a club and what you want to do. Again, I'm not trying to say you have to do all that, not at all. But I just want to make you aware of where it's going, where you can go, and where other tennis clubs equivocal to yourself in size and nature are going. Okay, so there's obviously a focus on regional and rural as much as there is metro, but quintessentially I'd say there is more of a focus on regional, rural, and even metro, basically building social capacity in rural communities, and that's through sport as well, and you got to leverage that narrative as well and be very much across that. But obviously in urban areas, it's about the growth of urban areas and urban development, which means people need social and sporting infrastructure. Where does the tennis club come into that? And how does the tennis club cater for that in new areas, and it being a sporting feature of that new area, or catering for that new area, being in a 20-kilometer radius of that new area? Okay, all these things you need to think of. Point being, do a mind map. Put yourself in the middle as a tennis club. Not only think about funding opportunities, think about all potential programs and initiatives where you can ascertain funding and rule in and rule out as you see fit against your capabilities. So there's massive opportunities for you as a tennis club moving forward. Yes, it can be scary. Yes, it can be daunting. But if you do it on a graduated approach and a planned approach and involve all your committee, then it's achievable. And if you involve your governing bodies, right? Tennis Victoria, Tennis Australia, right? Again, to reiterate, they're there to help you. A lot of great resources being produced by these organizations, including tonight. So again, it's back to what you feel is what you can do and matching against that at the end of the day. Someone has to get the grant. It might as well be you. All right. And so again, it's a lot of money out there. all the time, every time. Okay, so it's about where you are in terms of that mindset and asking for that money at the end of the day. But the focus, obviously, predominantly in sport recently, has been increased participation and awarding funding around that through the provision of innovative and aspirational facilities. So access to all, disability access, female access, female changing rooms and the like as well, creating meeting rooms for meeting rooms hubs, solar panels, shading, drainage, all of these quintessential things basically that are needed to sustain it. They want to see very much a design and construct quality new facilities that are of a certain caliber and worth. They want to take you from being, hypothetically, a 1950s infrastructure-based tennis club to a 2022 infrastructure-based tennis club. Okay, and that means selling all aspects of what you want to be relevant to the community at the end of the day. And again, for everyone, basically, for students in the game and people who want to become aficionados of tennis, but also the general community who just want to play recreational tennis. So all these things about, do you want to fit into this? And if you want to fit into this, is the reason you're going to get money. If you don't fit into this, you and government are singing a different song, not where you want to be. Again, for women, removing barriers for disability access, multi-purpose facilities. Now we're seeing people wanting to build in government having a prerogative around centers of excellence and multi-purpose sporting facilities where tennis fits into that, and sharing the love with other sports. Something to contemplate. I'm not mandating it, but it's very much what the dictums coming out of TV in terms of Tennis Victoria and Tennis Australia around that as well. All right, I'm working with them and asking the question around that. And again, environmentally sustainable best practice in terms of drainage, recycling, solar paneling, energy efficiency, all of these things at the end of the day. Okay. How are we doing so far, folks? Anyone still awake? Not the most interesting subject matter on a Thursday night. You could be out late night shopping instead, yeah? But we're getting there, right? And there's a lot to think about. So go back and watch a copy of the webinar when you get it and digest it again, because it can seem daunting, everything I'm saying, right? Because it can be overwhelming, but it's a massive opportunity for you as tennis clubs. Because I see the great work. I work with clubs that sit across this great land, and they're doing great work, in fairness to them, before I even got there and said, do you think about this or did you look at that? All right. So again, you can be that club, and we probably are already to a great degree, just to empower you, but it's taking it to the next level. And whether you have the commitment and cause and time to do that. Strategic justification, universal sports priorities, let alone university sports priorities. I'm working with a lot of university sports, and they're always talking about, can we use community facilities? Can we get out beyond our own remit? And can we use partnerships and sign MOUs with community tennis clubs? Something's an option for you, right? If you're thinking maybe, I'm not at maximum capacity, you probably are oversubscribed. But if you're not, and you have a quiet Tuesday night or quiet Sunday morning for whatever reason, that you actually open it up then to, I'm just giving you this university support as a case in point. It could be PCYC, it could be YMCA, it could be anyone. That is sellable in your grant application then, because then you're building community capacity building, you're working with other entities. It shows even a greater validation what you're doing as a tennis club beyond your members. Again, Victorian Office of Sport priorities, other agencies for priorities around health and education and sport, local council priorities. What is this list? This list is your reading list. This is your bedtime reading list in terms of what you need to read to subscribe to. Great for insomnia, by the way. All right. So it's very much thinking about, right, what they're thinking is what I'm doing as a tennis club. And that's what I want to see in a well-written grant application, a correlation. All right. And a justification against that. So the urgency and continuing need for the project to be delivered. You nearly got to play the gamut of, if we were removed as a sporting entity or community entity as a tennis club from the equation in the community, it would be detrimental for society, which it would. All right. Now, this is what other sports are having to deal with at the moment, basically, because they're just falling by the wayside for whatever reason. You're not. You got good participation rates. You still have potential to grow always. But it's very much leveraging that with council and leveraging that with state and federal government that can possibly bulldoze the tennis club, because we have these high numbers. So that's the decision that people are thinking of in government, basically going, can we do without a tennis club in the area? Do we need it? All right. Will one court suffice instead of 6? All right. And obviously it's what Tennis Victoria and Tennis Australia are undertaking government relations against that. But you need to be part of that as well. and work with Tennis Victoria and Tennis Australia in advocacy, government relations, brokerage, and being there to support that narrative at the end of the day and the growth of your own game. Okay. Strategic justification against all of these project objectives, outcomes, beneficiaries, project clearly addressed aim and focus. I get a lot of grant applications, as I said earlier on, talk around the subject rather than at the subject. Just give it to me straight. It's the KISS principle. Just keep it simple. Okay. This is a grants application is not a test of your Dickensian or Shakespearean language skills. It's a test of common sense. Just give it to me straight. Okay. So again, it's very much that people think they need to inflate or waffle or use wordology or use big words. No, you don't. I just need matter-of-fact business case that gives it to me straight. I don't have the time to indulge in reading your great Russian novel, all right, as a grants assessor. So it's very much, again, that I just need it to be matter-of-fact. This means drafting, editing, proofreading before you commit. This means having a project plan that you utilize rather than plagiarize. 2 words that irk me as a grants assessor: copy and paste. Oh my God. Why is it I work with tennis clubs that go, I'll tell you what, we've got a great idea. Let's put in last year's application, verbatim, the one that we didn't get, and just resubmit it again. Sure, what could go wrong? That's what they call the definition of insanity, all right? So again, it's very much thinking about, yes, utilize last year's application, but tweak it and twerk it, all right? Amend it, update it, version 2.0. The budget's not going to be the same. Factor in inflation, right? Factoring in ongoing costs, all right? All of these things at the end of the day. So remember now, you were asked recently, not that I'm saying it's over at all, you were asked to implement a COVID safety action plan for your club or your association. Now I'm asking you to implement a financial safety aspect plan for your club to enhance the sustainability of your club through grants and through other means, because they will ask you in a grant application, how are you sourcing revenue or funding? Now, you should be obviously putting in your revenue stream for what you're making through the club on a day-to-day, week-to-week, whether it be everything from court hire or venue hire to what you're retailing. But it also should be through grants, fundraising, sponsorship, and every other means and mode as well. Because they would look at you dimly otherwise going, why aren't you doing that? Okay. So again, quantifying, qualifying use of facility, participation, events, partners identified, urgency and need. I know you all needed the money yesterday, but you might get the money for up to 6 months in a grant by the time it's awarded to you. And you can't do retrospective because that's deemed null and void. So you can't get ahead of yourself and do the grant because they'll go, no. You can't start until we sign the contract. Okay. So you got to give yourself the latitude, the time frame to do that. Okay. So you see a lot of government grants now giving you a 1 or 2 year latitude for infrastructure projects, because they know there's going to be blowouts. They know there's going to be supply chain issues. They know there's going to be COVID. They know there's going to be bad weather. Okay, so it's being practical and realistic about your own expectations in terms of feasibility and implementation. And evidence, clear scope of works is what they want to see. Well-considered documentation, so schematics, drawings, architects' drawings, designs, plans. As I said, government loves a good master plan now. Can't get enough of it. All right, having a strategy around your master plan, which is encompassing of your infrastructure projections as a club, but also your development as a club and a sport. Incorporated design principles, so best practice, basically sustainable elements incorporated in that if you're doing infrastructure, and your approaches to that, and evidence-based, that you've again consulted with user groups in the tennis world and outside the tennis world. When eligible applications would be assessed against the following criteria: strategic justification. So you tell me you need money for tennis for this infrastructure. Why? Your first template in grants is the 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, why. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? When do you do it? Why do you do it? Equals how much money do you want for it? And most tennis clubs struggle with the why. Why do you need the money? You need to quantify and qualify that. So that's down to project scope and inclusive design, project affordability, project deliverability. I am testing you on your ability to manage money, manage taxpayers' money. Now, most tennis clubs will give the assurance, of course, we're good at managing money. We manage money every day. But can you manage these large amounts and not misappropriate it and deliver on time and on budget? Okay? Because I'm not going to come looking for the money back as a government entity, but it's a logistical nightmare for me to do that. But there will be a perception, which is reality then, which is Moving forward on future grant applications, can they be trusted as a tennis club? Okay, excuse me. So a checklist for you, right? Print it out, laminate it, stick it on the staff notice board. You need to be building capacity as a tennis club for your game, for your club, for investment. You need to have a sustainability of approach. You need to give them the assurance you're going to be here in 3 to 5 years. You're creating a profile for your business, and I use that word deliberately, business. I do mean your tennis club, obviously, but your business, profit or loss. You're planning your grant application. You're proactive, not reactive. That means you have a grants calendar. That means you know what's coming up, your top 5, top 10 applications in a given year. You're doing the acquittal of the grant upon receipt of the grant, so the auditing, the evaluation not just for the funding body, but inherently for yourself in terms of best practice and learning. You're extrapolating from a project plan, business plan, and a CapEx, which is your budget, and your application connects with the entity that's marking it, communicates quite clearly what the ask is, and gives me the assurance that you can deliver on time and on budget. It's easy when you say it fast in an Irish accent, isn't it? But very much that this is something that should be stuck to religiously, that you tick every one of these boxes or a majority of these boxes. Okay. And you can do this if you take it in a baby step fashion. All right. Don't look before you leap. All right. So again, think about quantifying, qualifying where you are as a tennis club. All right. I might open it up for some questions because I see people popping in stuff in the chat room. So I'll just have a quick squiz there if you don't mind, and I'll address those as well. Greeting PMC. Thank you very much. Don't forget your question in the chat. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Matt, Keith, do you look at grant applications differently if it was compiled by a professional as opposed to a club committee doing it itself? Good question, Matt. I can discern when it's written by a club and when it's written by a professional. I can see all the hallmarks. Let alone when I've written it for the club. It's very much that I can discern. Yeah, I can see the difference in the writing, the difference in the narrative, Matt, and the different the way it's structured in terms of response. Yes, there's a marked difference, and I have seen that in the past, basically. So, you know, it's really a decision for the club where they have the capacity to do themselves, and capacity in terms of time, but also capacity in terms of finance, right? You got to pay a grants writer. And by the way, they're moving away from the fee-based and success model. And you can't, by the way, the other thing is you can't pay the grants writer out of the grant. All right. So again, all these decisions must be made basically in terms of utilizing a grants writer at the end of the day. So you'll be testing a grants writer under industry knowledge and proficiency, their success rate, and their knowledge of that particular funding round as well, and what they can put together for you. So there's a lot of considerations. But again, the resources are there to help you from TV with a lot of this already before you even have to go near a grants writer, basically. All right. So again, utilize resources that are there already from the Tennis Association and from your development officers, and asking them the questions before basically thinking about a grants writer, and then think about a grants writer. Really, if you don't have the time and a push comes to shove, you go, I just can't get this done, or nor do I have the know-how to get it done at the end of the day. Then I think you need an industry expert. The equivocal I always use, which is the one my wife taught me, which is when the tap springs a leak in the bathroom, she'd rather get what they call an industry professional called a plumber in, rather than Keith traipsing off to Bunnings and go down and getting some new taps for himself, because she knows I'll get the taps, but I'd also get a blower, a new lawnmower, 6 pots of paint, basically, and everything else that's in aisle 7, 8, and 9, basically. And it still will have a leak, and the bathroom will be like the Titanic by the time I get back. So very much, basically, you think about having an industry practitioner who understands it rather than having to go at it yourself. All right. So there's no DIY on grants, really. You know, it's either resourcing yourself to build your own skill set, or you're going to get someone to help you at the end of the day. So keep those questions coming, all right, in the chat room. Basically, feel free to put them in there. I'm happy to address them as we go through as well. I'll also, anyone now want to unmute and ask me a question? Anyone feeling brave? No?
Yeah, Keith, I was just going to say, hi guys, it's Matt from Yakandanda. But yeah, no, you touched on that. We're going through second stages of like, we were successful with the EOI, with the Bushfire Development Fund. So now we're going through the next phase. And Sam Condon, I've got to say, our Tennis Vic rep up this way has been really helpful. So
great.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm overutilizing him, but yeah, no, it's been
Earning his
great
money.
in that regard.
Yeah. No, that's great, and that should be your first port of call. It should always be your first port of call. You know what I mean? It's not a, even if you rang me in the first instance, Matt, I would have said, "Have you talked to Tennis Victoria?" You know what I mean? Like, so I think you use people where they're best fit at the end of the day. And I think it's something you need to think about, basically. It's great you've undertaken that. Congratulations on your success and moving forward as well. Long way to continue, and I wish you continued success with that. And then it's great that you've highlighted that. And a lot of sporting clubs are not self-aware necessarily around the funding that's out there around the bushfires and the floods and everything that's been out there in terms of sporting infrastructure. And they should be looking at that.
Well, yeah, and I was wondering, obviously with Tennis Vic and Tennis Australia, that's great. We've got our local council, the Shire, they're pretty good. I suppose advertising grants and making sure people are aware. But I was thinking that is probably the biggest factor is just not being aware of the potential grants that you should be going for. But it's not just Tennis Vic or Tennis Australia. It's all your other, local government, state government, even federal government sort of stuff that you're just not aware of.
Yeah, it's massive. And that's only even touching the surface, as I said, on philanthropic grants. I mean, 400 million was given out last year in philanthropy in Australia, and
wow.
And that's, exactly right. That's growing about 4.5% per year. Now, that means clubs having their own charitable foundation or using the ASF, which certain clubs are contemplating in other states. And so it's just a decision or just a mindset. I'm not saying yay or nay to that, but it's very much, this is where clubs are going. And I'm seeing this in other sporting codes. Golf are doing it, even water polo are doing it. So it's very much that you need to be contemplating where you are to where you need to be vis-a-vis your own expectation and other people's expectation of funding. And given that there's 400 million being handed out, basically, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And certainly, 15 years in Australia, sport is the currency of this country. Sport is religion of this country. Everyone barracks for someone. Everyone plays something, basically. It's the one thing that brings us together as a country. All right. So it's understanding the power of what you have and the worth of what you have in the community as your tennis club and selling those virtues and values of your tennis club in a grant application. Thanks for that, Matt. Much appreciated.
No, thank you, Keith. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Yeah, I got someone else there. Hello.
Yep. Hi, Anthony Jackson. How are you?
Good, thank you, Anthony.
It's like talkback radio.
It is, isn't it? I'll do Jedediah and Disc later on. I'll play your top 3 tracks while we're at it.
We're a suburban tennis club, a Catholic parish, and we had 4 courts that were converted from Onticart to synthetic grass back in 2009. We're down to about 1.5 mils, and we've got $70,000 saved, and it's about 140,000. So we've sort of got the 50-50 approach. The question is, if we went ahead and did 2 of the courts and used the 70,000 we've saved to get them resurfaced, would a grant provider consider that we've sort of put in our 50% and now we're trying to get another 50% from a grant provider to do the back 2 courts?
Yes, because you're doing it on a stage and graduated approach. I would actually have greater reservations if you came to me saying that you wanted to do all 4 or 5 courts at once.
Yes.
So you're actually doing it in a better tactile way. So I like the way you're thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that would be well received as well.
Cheers.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're on a run, folks. Anyone else? I think have we got a question in the chat room? There you go. I'll pay you later for the plug. Thanks, Matt. All right, no, that's nothing to do with me. There you go. Any other questions? No? Okay, move on for the moment. What makes for a successful proposal, whether a program or project within the funding body's area of giving, sufficient documentation supported with facts, and a project that reflects people's needs, not organizational needs? And remember, this is about your members. This is about the general community. Stop talking about yourself as a club and talk about what you're doing for the game, what you're doing for the community, what you're doing for your members. Okay? In other words, if Anthony wants to have more courts, he's going to have more people playing in the courts, so hence he needs more courts, or he needs rejuvenation of his courts, because he's got them operating 24/7, which is what they want to hear, getting people out. It's a mandate from the feds, getting Australians out and at least committing to a half-hour physical exercise every single day. Tennis is a great way to do that, right? So again, it's introduced into all those programs around that. And then I could spend all evening on this, but I've tried to synopsize it down to 2 slides, why our projects declined. When you read through these bullet points, folk, What should be blatantly alarming or blatantly obvious, should I say, is just common sense. There's nothing here you can't autocorrect. There's nothing here you can't fix. Okay. But what I get a lot of the time with grant applications is this she'll be right approach. And I can't subscribe to that. And it's very much, again, reactive rather than proactive. And you need to be on the front foot, basically. All right. So again, it's kind of that show me the money from Jerry Maguire, you know, and it's very much, again, thinking about, oh, just give me the money and I'll come up with the idea, as I said earlier on, right? Again, that doesn't give me quality assurance, you know. Government at federal level subscribe to program logic, rhyme, reason, sense, rationale. A leads to B leads to C leads to D, not A leads to E. There's no gaps in your argument. That's what they want to subscribe to, and that's where they want you to be as a tennis club, okay? And then the second slide, again, they're always chasing down evaluations, that last bullet point there. Don't be that organization that are always ringing and emailing saying, you know, where's the evaluation of the project? As I said, the inherent expectation is you're doing it for yourself anyway as a tennis club because you're that professional. Okay. See, I work with tennis clubs who are extremely professional on the court. All I'm asking is to duplicate that and be professional off the court. All right. So they can organize tournaments, they can organize coaching clinics, they can organize basically round robins, they can organize sessions. Just take that same mindset across the business operations of your club and sustainability of your club and working through your club. All right. And I think people take a speculative approach, as I said in one of the bullet points here, whereby, you know, I get this a lot as a grant assessor. You know, there's $500,000 available. And I get a grant application from someone going, oh, but we need 750,000. So we're applying for 750,000, but there's only $500,000 available. I know, but we need 750. I'm like, I'd love to indulge you, but I can't. All right. I've only got 500 to spend. All right. So again, it's optimizing your ask as well and thinking about that. Measuring outcomes. This is the expectation again of what they want. They want your mission statement, your vision statement as a club, your goal statement, your objective, how you're measuring activities and tasks are necessary to accomplish it, benefits or results, bang for my buck. Apart from seeing value for money, what else do I want to see as a government? Grants equals votes. So who's your new best friend, if not already? Your state or federal MP. In fact, get them down to play a game of tennis. What a great photo op. All right. All of that. Okay. Benefits or results for each objective and performance indicators of success. You say you're successful at a tennis club. Tell me how you're successful. How do you measure success? That's like actually an indicative question that's come up now more and more in grant application forms. It's a great question, isn't it? How do you define success as a tennis club? I actually had one tennis club in another state actually answer that question very well, full stop. Great answer, but not enough to suffice the answer to the question. All right, I need a little more detail than that. All right. Again, to reiterate, a well-written grant application is clear, concise, and compelling, or short, succinct, and to the point. No waffle, no wordology, no languid, long-winded sentences. Says what it says, does exactly what it says in the tin. That's what I want to see. I had this from another tennis club recently as well. We are the premier tennis club in the vicinity. And I went, oh yeah, how did you get that award? Oh no, we nominated ourselves. So you're the #1 tennis club and you gave yourself that ranking. Yeah. Okay, no. So it's very much, again, that you need to quantify and qualify everything you're putting on the page. Back it up. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be realistic at the end of the day. All right. Sell yourself for all your virtues, but they need to be realistic and truthful. Again, what they're trying to achieve as a funding body is what you're trying to achieve. So that means researching them as much as researching yourself, asking the questions, getting involved with the Office of Sport, getting involved basically with your local government authority, getting involved and looking on from afar what other sports are doing. And not about copying and pasting, but thinking about, okay, they're onto something there. Can we immerse that in our own club? Is there relevance to that? Is there a point to that? Is there an expectation for that at the end of the day? And what you really need. What do you really need at the club? And what you should be applying for funding for, rather than just thinking, you know what, we need to fill whatever it is basically in the club. You know, I had many moons ago a tennis club apply for a transport grant for community transport for a minibus for the club, which they were eligible to apply for. Well, I love the audacious nature of this club. This is in a different state than Victoria, by the way. They sent in their grant application and also a copy of the BMW bus catalogue and earmarked page 36, saying that's the bus they wanted. And they gave me the color as well they wanted it in. And I went, wow, that's forward. So again, it's very much thinking that there's an ask, but don't get too liberal with the ask as well. Very much concerned that how do you play nicely in the sandpit? With other tennis clubs in your vicinity, with your governing body, Tennis Victoria, and sports and local government as a whole. Okay, government doesn't like silos. Doesn't like you as a tennis club just thinking about yourself. It's thinking about your members, thinking about your community, think about your role in sport as a whole in society. That's the way you need to be thinking. And then the need for funding, the commercial potential, the return on investment, as I said, value for money, value in VFM. What's WFM, folks? WWIFM? Anyone has a guess what that acronym is? What's in it for me? What's the return on investment for government, right? In terms of the effects, as I said, grants equals votes. Market opportunity, because they mightn't have given you money to your tennis club in your area previously. Management capability, you're now being asked in certain grants for management bios, the skill set, the qualifications, the industry experience that your committee has in delivering on infrastructure projects. I know, right? Time to do that Masters of Engineering. So it's very much thinking about, you need to quantify and qualify that you got the right people making the right decisions to them to give them that assurance they know what they're doing when they give you the money and when you get the money. Okay. That means the expectation is you have the right people on the committee making decisions. And that comes back to them now talking to sport about succession planning, change management, governance, etc., etc. Local, state, and national benefits, the knock-on effect to this funding. So I may be rolling it out in Bendigo, Shepparton, Geelong, Ballarat, wherever, but how can it translate across Victoria to the greater benefit of not only tennis, but maybe sport across Victoria in terms of best practice? Okay, you need to be thinking about where you fit within that remit as well. So know the program rules, plan your application, be creative but honest. Don't say you can do it in 12 months when it's going to take you 36 months to do it. Research successful grants, look at who they gave the money to previously, for how much and for what. In other words, what do they like funding and what don't they like funding? Okay. Provide information requested, no more, no less. Answer the question you're asked, not what you think you're asked. This is very much like high school, university, or TAFE. Answer the question, get the marks. But break down the question. Look at the key words in the question. Answer the key words in the question, like describe and demonstrate. Break it down for them. Right? Spell it back to them that you have a qualified understanding of the question and you're answering accordingly. Because normally I'll get a party political broadcast as an answer. So here's an indicative question. Please provide a brief overview of your club. The optimum word there is brief. I'll still get a tennis club answering it going, we were founded in 1856 by a Catholic Presbyterian monk who liked tennis. In 1857, he got enough money together for the first tennis court. In 1850, we're only on 1858. You've got 500 words and we still got to get to 2022. No, computer says no. All right. So very much you need to think about clear, concise, compelling, basically, and answer the question, right? So brevity is the key. That means editing and proofreading and cutting out. Can't write like you talk. You don't have that opportunity. All right. So very much you need to think about planning your answers, structuring your answers, beginning, middle, end. Remember those beautiful things you got taught at school called grammar, syntax, punctuation, and spelling? Now's the time to get out the dictionary and thesaurus. All right. So people get stuck on buzzwords. Government do it themselves, right? But I'll tell you words they love in grants, right? To give you an example, I gave you two earlier on, innovation and sustainability. They're like agile, robust, effective, efficient, inclusive. Find a good adjective, noun, proverb, or verb and stick with it because they're action words. And grants is all about positive language. We are, we will, rather than if you give the money to us, something might happen with it, maybe. All right. I want to see positive language because grants are given for solutions, not problems. If you highlight the problem, which you should highlight the problem to 20 to 30% value, highlight the 20 to 30% value, not 100% value, because I want to see the solution. I only award the funding for solution-based strategy, which means how you're solving it. You just need the money to solve it. So don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution. If you're focusing on the problem, that's like you saying it's tennis club, oh, I'll tell you what, things are so bad out here. Don't give us the money. All right. So again, it's very much thinking about giving them an absolute opportunity to invest in you. And I'll shatter the illusion as grants assessors that we're blockers. We're trying to stop you getting the grant. Nothing could be further from the truth. We're trying to get you across the line. We're trying to give you every opportunity to get funded at the end of the day. Okay. How are we doing, folks? Questions? Talk to me. Don't want death by PowerPoint, do we? It's too late in the evening for that. All right. Come on. What are you thinking? You got one in the chat room, have we?
Keith,
Here
I
we
was
go.
going to say there's one in the chat
Yeah,
around
great.
particular websites and the
Yeah.
Google grants. So are there
Yeah,
anywhere that you should?
Loads. Yeah, loads. Obviously, Tennis Victoria will have information. Tennis Australia will have information. So please go there first. You've rightly said Grants Hub, great resource. Grants Guru is another one. Our Community is another one. Strategic Grants is another one. And then government, your local RDA, which is a federal government agency, Regional Development Australia. There's a number of RDAs across Victoria. They have a grants finder, which is like a search engine. And so you can just put in keywords and you'll see what grants come up, and that's a free resource. The other ones I mentioned, Grants Hub, Grants Guru, or Our Community and Strategic Grants, they're subscription services. You're going to pay a couple of $100 annual fee. So go to the freebies first, basically. And they'll help you resource it at the end of the day, basically. All right. There's also this Irish guy doing it. I can't remember his name. Grant something. I don't know, it'll come to me later on. But yeah, he does it as well. But yeah, there you go. Had to leave the self-plug in there. But yeah, there's a number of resources. Also, your local council, they'll have a vast array of information on grants. Your local MP, a number of them do grants newsletters. So state and federal MPs, make sure you subscribe to those. And they're free as well, obviously. Talk to your grants officer at local government, if they have one, your local government authority, talk to them about everything that's coming up and assistance and everything else there. And obviously your club development officer anyway, as well, okay? Huge amount of resources out there for you, all right? You got loads of new friends to make. All right. Anyone else, folks? Anyone else want to ask me a question? Just hanging in for the Riverdance and Irish jokes? I know, I would be too. All right. All good? Am I scaring anyone? Anyone think it could be watching Home and Away right about now? All right. We love that in Ireland. I went home to Ireland last month. My God, raving about it. Still like, oh, you live near there. And I was like, oh my God, Home and Away. Like, you know, seemingly everyone else loves it. Well, there you go. Working well. Social media, how are you doing in that, folks? Why is that important in grants? Because the same narrative that I see in your grant application should be reciprocated across your Facebook, your social media, your website. So the same narrative needs to exist. Because if you get shortlisted, as I said, I will Google you. I will look at all aspects of you as a club, including your presence, your physical and community presence. So may even ask for a site visit, all of these things. Okay, so I'm not saying you have to use all of these. Use what's pertinent and relevant for you as a club. Okay, and what's going to give you a greater translatable effect. So think about that and have been up to date and relevant and purposeful. You don't want to have your last Facebook post as August 2009. All right. Grants about telling a story, painting a picture with words, getting away from a last minute application and pressing send and hoping for the best. Being proactive or reactive, having that grants calendar, as we just talked about, and utilizing those resources to build your grants calendar. And people can only help you if you know you exist. Profile. Oh, that's business storytelling, that's business development, that's getting out there and talking to people about what you're doing as a tennis club and working through all of those different things at the end of the day. David asks, how does one identify a future grant process that may replicate a sports ROTS grant? Please explain, David. Could you explain that? Do you mind unmuting and just talking me through that? You there, David?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
There you go.
it's a couple of years ago, there was a Commonwealth Government infrastructure grant process for sporting clubs that became quite infamous. A lot of people,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of effort into the grants, and it turns out, in our case, for example, we shouldn't have bothered. We were in the wrong electorate. So I guess we're a bit wary about which grants are properly managed on their merits and which ones are not. Is it possible to spot them, or you take your chances?
Okay. Yeah, obviously a lot of the time you have more success if you want to build a multi-story car park than a tennis amenity, right? Look, not trying to be facetious, it doesn't operate that way. That was a glitch, and I'll be honest about that as a person who's been working for government, with government for many years. It doesn't happen like that normally. They are more open and transparent than that, and they are trying to be more ethical than that, and they are being more ethical about that. That was really mismanaged on all levels, basically, and that is a really much a rarity. I don't see the majority of funding programs like that. So I don't think you need to be cognitive or think about, I'm in the wrong electorate. There are obviously electorates that, you know, if the sitting member is in the opposition, it's harder, or the sitting member is locked in for 20 years and they are in the opposition, it's harder, or they're not, there's no ministerial position represented. They are things obviously you're working against regardless of where you are. But either which way, basically, government likes to have proportional representation as best it can. And without basically throwing government under the bus here, it's very much you still got to work with what you got to work with, and you still got to work with them. And that means looking at all tiers of government, local, state, and federal, basically, and optimizing your chances against all of them, and potentially, as I said, philanthropic or private sector as well. But there's always a commitment to sport. So no matter who's there, it's going to be a valued ask as long as you can produce a valued business case at the end of the day. So it's a relevant point in terms of current history. But they have done everything possible to do a massive turnaround on that, and given such a massive mistake it's been, and basically a massive issue for them as a translative effect. So shouldn't be necessarily a going concern, David. That answer your question?
Thanks very much, Keith.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions, comments? Open them up. Talk to me. No? All good? Okay. So again, work with other connectors, as I said, and those connectors are your members, your council, other tennis clubs, your members themselves, basically. And I'm saying that because you may unearth the grants writer within your club, right? Someone who comes from a writing background, a teacher, a journalist, or a person involved in business who's been doing business cases or business reports, someone who's articulate like that at the end of the day, who has an understanding of it. Internal and external resourcing, again, what are you doing to basically build capacity within your own club around grants, let alone seeking help outside of that? And local, state, or federal current affairs, and being across what's been mandated, as we just talked about, from government, what they deem as best practice, what they deem as basically what they're awarding funding for. So it's being mindful of all these things. And again, I'm very aware, as I stated earlier on, that you, as volunteers, are committing hours and hours and hours already. And now I'm asking you to commit hours and hours and hours again. But there's no shortcuts to grants. And what you put into it is what you get out of it. Otherwise, you're buying an Oz Lotto ticket. And it's very much thinking about, how am I really going to do this in a tactile way? Not only grants, as I said, but all funding. And again, you should be looking at the full remit of fundraising, sponsorship, which I know a number of you will be and are, crowdfunding, bequests, donations, all these other ways of funding as well. And it's very, very important to justify the grant as much as anything else at the end of the day. Petra asked, what projects do governments like to fund? Definitely infrastructure, obviously, Petra. Community development initiatives, as I said, around female participation, CALD and Aboriginal participation, health and well-being initiatives. All of those initiatives would come to mind initially, as well as a lot more. And as I gave you the example of mental health, I mean, that's a program we're just doing with a tennis club at the moment in another state. They're doing a mentoring program around particularly mental health for men and the issues they're facing of a certain age set, and how they're working through the club, and they're doing a balanced equation between getting the men physically fit through tennis, but also getting psychologists talking to them, mentors talking to them, basically their peers talking to them, and they're using tennis as the conduit. Now, we're turning them back at the door, the amount of people that want to give us funding for that, both from the public and private sector. We can't take money off everyone. That's a surprising statement, isn't it? We can't take money off everyone, but we can't. All right. So again, it's about programs like that as well, but predominantly infrastructure, all right, is the big one, obviously, you always have. But you should be thinking the other way as well in terms of what else you can get funding for, whether it be education as well and other projects. You're welcome. All right. As I said, that's why I believe it truly is a massive opportunity for you as a tennis club to think for tennis and to think outside of tennis as well, in terms of what will be funded at your tennis club at the end of the day to sustain your club and to keep the doors open and to basically to get funding for different endeavors. As I said, this is your first template. Subscribe to it, utilize it, work through it. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? When do you do it? Why do you do it? And how much money do you want for it? Okay. Come to those decisions, utilize those decisions, work through those decisions at the end of the day. Okay. Talk to me, folks. What are you thinking? Now's not the time to be shy. Talk to me. Utilize me. It's free consultancy, right? Pick my brain. Let me put a question then. And Tam, I'll pose a question to you basically, given, and I'm trying to put you on the spot basically, but what is the prerogatives? Let's blatantly talk to the clubs here about the support that's there from TV in terms of grants basically, and in terms of what you envisage for grants yourself and the growth of the game through grants in Victoria.
Yeah, so obviously, as you said before, we've got our club development officer network, which are really the connectors in. But similar to the session here for clubs, we're also doing that with our own workforce as well, making sure that we're, Tennis Victoria, like our clubs, are also applying for grants. So we're looking at all of these different things. We're learning ourselves, and through that process, obviously be able to pass on the knowledge to our clubs. So we do have parts on our website that have got that information. Obviously, the grants through our TVN, look at through those, your newsletters that potentially your club development officers will send out, and the communications that you have with them in particular. But yeah, look, I think the point that you made is that it's looking far and wide too. I think we all are aware of our current sources of grants, the sport and rec and those sorts of things. But even for us as a sport, we're looking outside that, the Department of Education, Department of Health, like what is that environmental and sustainability? That's another big one at the minute around. So what is the angle that you can have so that we're not going back to the same funding sources time and time again? Because whether or not we like it, sports bucket of money isn't as big as education and health and those sorts of things. So if we can show that we're the answer to those issues, then we're more likely to get those bigger buckets of funding. So yeah, look, the first point, as you've made, it was always connect with your club development officer. They will then connect you with the experts in the office. We have a facility places to play team. We have an inclusion team. They will then be able to work with you on the specifics of the who, what, where, why, what you've got up here. So that's our role as the servicing arm for the club. So please use us as much as you can.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, health and education are the big two buckets of funding, and I think now I'm working with the PHNs, the public health networks, and the LHDs, the local health districts, who are awarding funding to community entities, including sporting clubs, for the initiation of projects and programs. So let's diversify the funding focus, folks, and not just oversubscribe Office of Sport, but very much huge amount of funding out there, basically, elsewhere, as rightly stated by Tam as well, basically. There's a question in there on sports psychologists as well. I don't know, Tam, do you want to take that to TV? Have a sports psychologist that can run sessions for teens in sport? And
I think this is the other part that you mentioned earlier. It's also about partnerships. It's linking with those specialists within your organization. So groups like Headspace, where you can access free services, they're the types of things that we would then connect you with. Because we have those networks not only at a state level, but also sometimes at a regional and a club level. So again, it mightn't be Tennis Vic that can help you, but we can be the connector between that and partnerships that might be able to help in that sense. Or on the flip side of it, if it's not for funding, it's just those partnerships and people that deliver those professional services like we've done tonight for yourself, Keith.
Yeah, very much so. Yep. Julie asked the question, any suggestions for clubs that are not on council and therefore not eligible for most grants on offer? You're not necessarily not eligible for most grants on offer. There's a pro and a con, obviously, to be a private club or an entity that's not on council facility. And so you're not bound by council a lot of the time, but then obviously you're not supported by council a lot of the time. I think that a lot of the private clubs that I've worked with in tennis and other sports have very much looked at the diversification of funding, as I've gone through already, have looked at basically still selling themselves to government as a community sporting entity, regardless whether on council land or not. That's neither here nor there. You're still having an impact in the community, still providing sport to the community. You still need to sell it that way as well, Julie. And then obviously, potentially, as I said, looking at philanthropic, because you could set up your own club foundation, being a private entity as well as an offset to who you are as a club. But still, obviously, working with Tennis Victoria, working with Tennis Australia, working through council, even though they're not obviously your overarching entity, but very much working through all those processes as well, just from a different angle, quintessentially. David's talked about at least one big government sporting infrastructure grant requires councils to apply on behalf of clubs. That's correct, David. Our club is a concern that councils will prioritise grants for clubs and council land. Well, yes. Let's talk about it openly and blatantly. Why wouldn't they, right? It's going invested interest for them at the end of the day. So that is the perceivable negative there. Obviously, they're going to look after their own, per se, in terms of their own community sporting infrastructure. Regardless, though, if you can put forward a good business case for investment, you will get, number one, in principle support, which is still worth something, potentially get financial support as well, basically, and obviously just again access still that provide that they can validate you to state and federal government as an investment opportunity, regardless of whether they're going to commit funding or not. So there's still pros and cons to it. I'd still undertake the process of getting them involved and working with them regardless at the end of the day. All right. So talk about an investment rather than a gift. As I said, that should be strongly in your narrative, straight to the point around that, basically, and talk about the return on investment. As I said, don't dwell on problems, focus on opportunities, problems equal plus solutions, and a realistic assessment of the urgency. Again, I know you needed the money yesterday, but it mightn't happen for a couple of months at least. So don't start in the project, as I said, it'll be null void and retrospective at the end of the day. Project rationale now has become up as a standalone section in grants, which is the justification for it. You think it's a good idea, prove it to me. Why is it a good idea as a club to do this, want this, ask for this kind of money at the end of the day? Okay. And in order to do this, I've just quantified and qualified 4 bullet points there that I would subscribe to you that you undertake as part of your project rationale. Demonstrate the need, objectively describe the situation, opportunity, problem or issue that exists, demonstrate the relevant compelling problem or need to alleviate with the funding, and back it up with your own polls, surveys, as well as what's emanating out of Tennis Victoria, Tennis Australia, and local government in terms of sport in your area. Okay. But again, break it down, build it up. It fits in with local planning, so you need to subscribe to that. And include that compatibility in your argument that you've undertaken consultation is now nearly inherent for a tennis club to have undertaken community consultation, not those within the club, but those surrounding the club geographically and the broader community that invest into the thinking this is a great idea that the tennis club is doing this, wanting this, and want to improve their facilities or roll out something basically at the end of the day. Okay. Again, people can only help you if they know you exist. Get out there and start selling yourselves and selling the virtues of what you do through the game of tennis. All right, project timing, and you got to factor in the time management here and not have unrealistic expectations of submitting an application and getting that done, but also basically delivering on the project on time and on budget as well. So factor in all of these different things when you're putting together time, the flexibility of approach, the fluidity of approach that needs to happen, basically, because things blow out, supply chain issues, COVID, bad weather, etc., etc., etc. I could go on. Factor all of these things and be realistic in terms of what you're asking for. In terms of the budget, it's very much that I don't want to see a misappropriation of funding, a financial mismanagement. It costs what it costs. I don't want to see any artificial budget inflation. So again, it's making sure you get the quotes, making sure they add up, making sure basically there's no padding out, and very much that each line item is relevant to the project or the program or the initiative, not for the general operations of the club. I am not there to pay your bills. That's the perception of government. So your overheads are your overheads, not mine. So what you have to factor in, and this is the overarching thought process you need to have about the budget. Yes, you will get the grant for the implementation. Yes, you will get the grant for the infrastructure to be put in place. Who's covering the running costs? Well, that'll be you. So where's that money coming from as a tennis club? That's what you've got to factor into your budget. And that's what they want to see in your budget, operational budget. And that's the big consideration for you as a tennis club. Where am I finding that money? And if I have the money, can I appropriate that amount of money for the upkeep of floodlights, courts, club rooms, whatever the case may be? That's what they want to see, that you have the capability, the knowledge, the know-how, the expertise, the guile to do all that. And more importantly, the money in the bank account to do all that. Otherwise, I'm not going to invest in you. Why would I? It's just a black hole. So again, be cognizant of that in terms of their expectation around funding. And 50-50, as I said, has become very prominent. Cost offset, risk offset, as I said, which means you've got to come up with the cash. not about speculative that you will have the cash in 6 months or you will get it through another grant or through a fundraiser. I want to see the cash right now. All right. And generally speaking, obviously, the less you ask for in terms of a budgetary ask, the more chance you have of getting the grant, because as a funding body, they want to basically get a wide demographic and geographic of the funding. They want to have a greater translatable effect as possible. So if you optimize the ask, what do I mean by that? Let's say a grant funding round. There's one open in New South Wales at the moment for $150,000 for a sport. I'm trying to dissuade every single applicant just from applying for $150,000. You need to optimize it. Is it 125? Is it 100? Because everyone shouldn't be applying for 150, right? It's very much about optimizing it and what it really costs and what you can do and compartmentalize your ask. Maybe you can't do the full project. Maybe you can do a component of your project. Maybe you only ask for a component of your project, as we talked about earlier on, with doing a certain amount of courts rather than doing all your courts. Do you have to do all your courts at once? No. Should you do all your courts at once? In a perfect world, it'd be great, but not realistic necessarily. And again, offset it and look at different ways of, does everything have to be brand new? Can it be shared? All these other ways of looking at it, rather than just going, I need brand new, I need everything now. It's going to be an output for them. And factor in inflation, factor in salary increases. Sometimes they allow for project officer and a wage component. So factor that in, the ongoing costs around that, if that is the case, and that's allowed for. And again, make sure you check the eligibility on the grant application, make sure you check the guidelines, and make sure you subscribe to them basically throughout your application. And everything must be related to the project. As I said, if it's just for the general operation costs or even minimal costs, not going to pay for it. Otherwise, I do see that as artificial budget inflation and a blowout and an unnecessary expectation. And realistically, I'm not going to pay for it. As I said, we don't do retrospective. And as I said, don't do anything until you sign the contract. And your two new best friends, certainly in your grants process, can be your accountant and can be your lawyer. Your accountant or bookkeeper to go through your budget before it's submitted, and your lawyer to look at the contract of agreement, because it may deviate from the original contract, as has been the case with government in the past. They can move the goalposts. It's at their discretion, of course. Methodology, excuse me, has become a standalone section as well, like project rationale. It's clearly linking a pathway between individual stages of your project. Time management, project management, all those things. Okay, so very much you need to think about, right, how am I planning this? How am I designing this? How am I implementing this at the end of the day? Okay, I have a question here, do I do. David, thanks for an explanation. From one perspective, it's quite depressing. I'm sure success in grant applications requires the committee to be very professional to a degree, not achievable for most clubs. Our experience is as difficult to fill committees. True. Most people who want to join want to arrange tennis events, not become professional business managers. Yeah, it's true. I subscribe to that as well, David. And that is a problem, obviously, for every sporting entity, let alone tennis clubs. But there are people out there who want those roles to a certain degree. And I think it's about also planting the mindset about, well, if you want to play tennis, you got to commit in other ways as well, basically, as a tennis club and tennis member. You can't just take. You have to give something back. And it's optimizing as well volunteer management. So at my own club, people are asked to volunteer for 2 hours per week. And interesting enough, once we corralled it down to 2 hours, people went, oh, I can give you an extra hour or two. Because we've measured it, given that everyone's time poor as Australians. We have work commitments, we have family commitments. So we've optimized the ask for our committee members and for our members to come on board at the club. So it makes it manageable. And we're being very tactile about who we've led on the committee and who we want in the committee and what skill sets that are best related for the committee. So I appreciate your point of view, I respect your point of view, but there is a way around it. And it's a measured approach around it, and it's a different mindset in the club. And you're right, you have to change the mindset of those people within the club to get there at the end of the day. But it can be done, and I've seen it done by numerous sporting entities as well, again, over a staged approach at the end of the day. And thank you for the feedback. So should be a clear pathway linking individual stages of the project, but very much that's what I want to see, is that something that makes rhyme, reason, sense, rationale at the end of the day. Okay. This is one of 5 project plans that I give out to clubs. And I wanted to share one with you tonight, basically. A project title, optimally 5 words, let alone less than 10. Project summary is 100 words, encompassing of your purpose of the project, the scope of the project, the people involved in the project who will be delivering the project on behalf of the club, the financials, the timescales, the risks, all of those things. And then your full project description is 1,000 words, encompassing all of that. The aim, description, why the project came about, part of a larger project, all these things. So design it, build it, sell it. Okay, so go back through this when you get a copy of this and go through it and make note, obviously, for yourselves and where you feel there's potential gaps and where you can enhance at the same time as well. These are the 7 commandments, as we colloquially call them. This is from the feds, but I think it's applicable to state and federal government and anyone, in fact, that if you abide by these 7 key principles of grants, you're going to do quite well, no matter what grant you're applying for. And you can see how much they do love the words effective and efficient in Canberra. All right, so again, very much look at this and have these inclusive. So government loves when you quantify in a grant application inputs, outputs, outcomes. Inputs, how you're resourcing what you're putting into it. Outputs, the translative effect of what's going to happen because of the grant's funding. Outcomes, the greater translative effect for sport, for the community, for shining a light on government, for committing funding to it. That's the way you need to be thinking as well. Inputs, outputs, outcomes, as well as these 7 key principles. They're the first 4. These are the last 3. And we see our old friend in there as well, value for money. Where clubs across sport in Australia are getting caught out at the moment are points 5 and 6. Governance, best practice, mindset, all of these things in just basically, as was rightly pointed out in the questions, going, well, how am I going to get committee members? How am I going to get volunteers? How am I going to get the right people to think the right way and to make the right decisions? This is what we're going to have to work through in the coming years, because government have this expectation around that you're going to be at that level rather than at this level. Okay. And your top 10 tips that I would provide to you. Make it about your reader, prospective client. Answer the question. Try not to waffle. Make it clear what's in it for them to return investment. Be direct. Talk to the subject rather than around the subject. Avoid sweeping statements. Give great examples, mini case studies. Remember, looks and kill. Well, if it's written in a sloppy manner, must reflect the sloppy organization that wrote it. Jog their memory if you've been in receipt of funding from them in the past, and remind them what a great job you did on time and on budget delivering that. And make a word perfect. Count your words and make your words count. Old journalistic adage, but very true. And that's me. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, but feel free to ask me any questions after the fact. Feel free to contact me, but I'm going to open it up for questions right here, right now, either in the chat room, or you can feel free to unmute and ask me any question you like. Within reason, obviously, and within grants. I can still tell you the Irish jokes if you want as well.
Keith, I have a question.
Go for it, Anthony.
Have you seen any templates that clubs could use, be it in a Word format? I don't think a lot of clubs would have access to graphic designers, that you could do it in Adobe InDesign, but something that you could then, it's got all the parts that they're wanting, and it's formatted nicely, and then people can populate, because at the moment it's so much information that needs to be provided in a very succinct manner. And it's sort of, you'd probably get from 10 different grants, 10 different styles and the way people are doing it. I guess if people are trying to assess them quickly and easily, if there's a format approach that allow them to sort of assess faster also.
There's not necessarily a unilateral approach. They just want to guarantee that you have a project plan in the first instance, that you have a surety of mind and a surety of conviction that you're going to do it. Secondly, do what my local tennis club did, which is enhance the local graphic designer by giving them membership, and which they did basically, and got a graphic designer on board, and she does a lot of work pro bono for them. But outside of that, there's a number of tennis entities. I know Tennis Australia are contemplating this in terms of the resources and kits, and I'm sure TV are doing the same as well in terms of club resources, club toolkits. So watch this space in terms of what you can get rather than paying for it. But I just want more assurance that you have it. Now, the project plans that I give out, including that one there, Anthony, they're 1 or 2 pages. It's more about, that's it. It's more about, we've given the assurance that as a club, we've given it careful consideration. We've quantified that consideration with a project plan that's then developed into a business plan that's developed into a master plan. So in the first instance, it's only 1 or 2 pages. And that project plan is a glorified answer to the 5 W's of who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah, right.
That's all it is. So it doesn't need to be schmick or look fantastic. It just needs to be a functional document.
Yes.
That's all I want to see, and or have the assurance you have it. So you give me assurance in answering the question that A, you have it, and B, you'll attach it. And that is then what you deem as best practice for rolling out projects, and basically what you measure against in terms of risk and what you measure against in terms of quantifiables and achievables. That's all they want to see, is an assurance that you're thinking that way as a club.
Yes.
That okay?
Yep. Thank you.
So watch this space. It'll be a lot coming basically, but there's a lot you can utilize on the web in terms of downloadable templates as well for free. But watch this space. I think it'll be resourced more by both respective tennis entities as well. So don't necessarily hold off on paying for it just yet. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Anyone else? Talk to me. Does feel like talking radio now, doesn't it? I'm going to bet Alan Jones in this now. All right. Who have we got calling in from where? Oh, it's gone very quiet. I've shocked the note.
Anyone?
Hey, I've got a question.
Go for it, Liz.
If I recently was unsuccessful in Community Shades Grant.
Yep.
And from everything you're saying in terms of what the club's doing, social media, website, we collaborated with Club Map to do a strategic plan.
Yep.
So we're looking at facilities and everything. The only thing we didn't have is a budget plan. Didn't think of it, and we asked for the full amount. In hindsight, what you're saying is we probably should have looked at a step by step. But our club is very disjointed, so it goes down on levels. So the current structures were quite dilapidated, and we thought that we would apply for sort of shading. We got the quotes and everything.
Right.
If they're asking for a budget plan, why don't they ask for that in an attachment?
They do and they are. Yeah, they do and they are and they will. So more and more they're going to give you these draft templates. So that's what I'm saying, watch this space. So more and more state and federal government entities, not so much local government, will be providing you those templates to populate.
Okay. All right.
So that's why I'm telling Anthony to hold off and basically because they're going to give it to you regardless anyway, but they want to set format for themselves. As Anthony said, a regulatory process that it makes it easy for them to look at the same thing just across a variance of applications. So Liz, watch this space. It's going to happen more. We should remove the obligation on you.
Okay.
That okay?
Yep.
No worries. Thank you. We got a question from Lena. Any tips on applying for lights? What is good to include? I've just done this with a football club for the New South Wales Football Legacy Fund, which closes tomorrow. And we talked about the standard and capabilities of lights around the following. Safety and security, particularly around female participation and accessibility for disability. And that includes everything from lighting from the car park to the pitch and from the dressing rooms to the pitch. And security as well, obviously, then lighting as well for security around basically security and maintenance of the facility, and it's illuminated as well, and lights around that. Obviously then greater opportunities to develop the sport because it's then open in the evening times to develop more basically the floodlights. It has a greater 24/7 accessibility around that, a greater leverage point. We were willing to share the facility with potentially other sporting or community entities who could benefit as well in the off season or when it wasn't being used, if it wasn't being used at all by the club as well. The standard that we were using that was going to bring capability of tournaments, championships and regional tournaments up to speed and up to grade in terms of the size and nature of the lighting that we're going to be using as well. That's what comes to mind. That's what we use in terms of football. You got something to add, Tam?
I was just going to say, yeah, definitely also to the environmental angle around LED lights, particularly that. Yep. So, you know, that reducing the carbon footprint.
Sorry, it's been a long day working on grants. So I think of them all. But yes, very valid point. LED lights, environmental sustainability. Yes, totally agree. Big tick. That should keep you busy, Nina, yeah? So we just answered it, right? So I'll get Tam to send you to the invoice, all right? So anyone else, talk to me, folks. Has it made sense what I said tonight? Or is it just scared the bejesus out of you? All right. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking, Keith, if there's no more burning questions, given that it's 1 minute to 8, but unless anyone has last one, speak now. No, okay. Look, on that note, I'd like to thank you very much, Keith, for tonight, for your wonderful insights. For those of you that have asked, as I said, we are recording this. Hopefully I've pressed the right button, recording it to the right place. And also we will be sending a copy of the slides out to everyone. We also have 2 sessions with Keith coming up in person. One in Melbourne on Tuesday, the 25th from 6:30 till 8 at Grace Park Tennis Club. So if you go away after tonight and think about a whole heap of ideas or things you want to ask him, feel free to come along and register to that. And we also have another one the following night on Wednesday, the 26th at 6:30 till 8 in Geelong. We're still finalising which venue in Geelong, but if you register like you registered for this event to either of those, we will then send you out that information as well. I hope tonight, on behalf of Tennis Victoria, is beneficial to you all. I really like to thank, as I said, Keith again for his insights and tips and tricks. And as we've been saying all night, it'd be great. Or if you do need your support, any more support, please contact in the first instance your club development officer. They will then if they can't answer it, they will be able to connect you with either internal groups or external groups that will be able to help you on the journey, whatever that may be. So thank you again to everyone for coming tonight. Probably a good night to be in home given the weather that's happening outside at the minute. So again, thanks you, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, folks. Good night. Stay safe. Take care. Get that grant.